Good evening, and welcome to our broadcast. Tonight we delve into a compelling and often contentious question. Are authoritarian regimes more appealing during a crisis? Joining us to dissect this issue are two distinguished thinkers. Mr. Jian Li will explore the affirmative aspects of this proposition, considering why such regimes might appear attractive in turbulent times. And Ms. Sophia Rossi will argue against this notion, championing the enduring strengths of democratic systems, even amidst crises. Our debate will proceed with opening statements from each speaker, followed by rebuttals, a moderated discussion, and finally, their closing arguments. Let us begin. Mr. Lai, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes. The proposition before us is not an endorsement of authoritarianism, but an exploration of its perceived appeal under duress. During periods of acute crisis, be it a pandemic, a natural disaster, or severe economic collapse, the perceived decisiveness and efficiency of authoritarian regimes can indeed hold a certain allure for populations desperate for stability and swift solutions. Consider the allure of decisive action. Authoritarian systems, with their centralized power, can often mobilize resources and implement measures with an expeditious capacity that democratic processes, by their very nature, might struggle to match. The ability to act with unfettered resolve, bypassing lengthy debates and the potential for bureaucratic inertia, can appear profoundly attractive when time is of the essence and threats are immediate. Furthermore, there is the aspect of order and control in chaos. Authoritarian regimes can enforce compliance with stringent measures, lockdowns, rationing, or restrictions on movement, far more readily than their democratic counterparts. For a populace grappling with societal disarray and palpable fear, the imposition of such order, even if heavy-handed, might be perceived as a necessary evil to ensure public safety and a return to normalcy. This public acquiescence often stems from a deep-seated desire for security when familiar structures seem to be crumbling. It is crucial, however, to nuance this observation. This appeal is frequently rooted in perception and the promise of immediate relief, rather than a considered preference for long-term governance ideals. It is a pragmatic, if sometimes desperate, response to exigent circumstances.
Dr. Hayes, thank you. Ms. Rossi, your opening statement.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes. Mr. Li paints a picture of appealing efficiency, but I contend that the supposed appeal of authoritarian regimes during crises is a dangerous mirage. It is a mirage that dangerously overlooks the fundamental importance of transparency, accountability, and human rights, principles that are often the first casualties under such regimes. Let us first address the price of this perceived efficiency. Swift action, when devoid of checks and balances inherent in democratic systems, can lead to grave, irreversible errors. Unaccountable power frequently results in the suppression of crucial information, early warnings about a virus, the true extent of environmental damage, or dissenting expert opinions, thereby exacerbating the very crisis it purports to manage. Moreover, policies enacted without broad consultation or oversight can disproportionately harm vulnerable populations, leading to the curtailment of civil liberties and widespread misinformation that further endangers the public. Conversely, let us consider the strength of democratic resilience. Democratic systems, while sometimes appearing slower due to their deliberative nature, foster public trust and societal buy-in through open discourse and participation. This participatory governance, built on a foundation of robust public discourse, leads to more sustainable, adaptable, and ultimately more effective crisis responses due to their long-term efficacy. Finally, crises managed by authoritarian means invariably deepen the chasm of distrust between the state and its citizens. Coercion may achieve temporary compliance, but it erodes the social fabric and the voluntary cooperation essential for overcoming prolonged adversity. True strength lies not in brute force, but in collective will, honestly engaged.
Thank you, Ms. Rossi. We now move to the rebuttal phase. Mr. Lai, you have the floor to respond to Ms. Rossi's arguments.
Ms. Rossi raises vital points. particularly concerning human rights and the perils of unchecked power. I do not dispute that these are paramount considerations in any functioning society. However, the crux of my argument pertains to appeal during an existential crisis. In such moments, the hierarchy of needs, as Maslow theorized, can shift dramatically for a populace under extreme duress. Immediate physical safety and the provision of basic necessities can, for a time, overshadow higher-order needs, including some civil liberties. The perceived trade-off offered by authoritarian control, order at the expense of some freedoms, can thus become temporarily attractive to those fearing for their survival. Furthermore, while democratic deliberation is a virtue, its perceived slowness can be a significant liability in fast-moving crises. Imagine a scenario requiring immediate, coordinated action across a nation, a sudden military threat, or a rapidly spreading contagion. In such instances, the public might view prolonged debate and consensus building not as thoroughness, but as dangerous indecision. Swift, top-down directives, even if imperfect, might appear far more effective and reassuring. It is essential to reiterate, this is about the psychology of crisis and the resulting appeal, not an endorsement of authoritarianism as a superior or ethically sound system of governance overall. The focus is on that critical, often terrifying moment of acute crisis.
Thank you, Mr. Lai. Ms. Rossi, your rebuttal.
Mr. Lee correctly emphasizes that his argument is about appeal, not inherent superiority. However, I contend that this very appeal is constructed upon a false dichotomy, the narrative that we must choose between rights and security, or between democratic process and swift action. This is a narrative often deliberately exploited by authoritarian leaders to justify the consolidation of power. Effective crisis management and the robust protection of human rights are not mutually exclusive. Indeed, they are often complementary. Mr. Lai speaks of decisiveness, but speed without direction, without the accountability that democratic oversight provides, can lead a society straight off a cliff. Decisions made in opacity, even if swift, can be catastrophically wrong and monumentally difficult to reverse once their devastating consequences become apparent. The suppression of dissent or inconvenient truths, a hallmark of authoritarian responses, prevents the course corrections vital in navigating complex crises. We have seen instances where early warnings from doctors or scientists were silenced, leading to far greater suffering. Conversely, democratic adaptability, fueled by a free press, an active civil society, and transparent institutions, allows for the identification and correction of mistakes with far greater efficacy. It is this capacity for self-correction, for learning and adapting, that constitutes true resilience, not the brittle facade of enforced order.
We now enter our moderated discussion. Mr. Lee, Ms. Rossi raises a crucial point about the potential for grave errors under authoritarian rule due to a lack of transparency. How does the appeal you describe account for the risk of such mistakes being hidden or uncorrected, potentially worsening the crisis in the long run?
That is a very pertinent question, Dr. Hayes. The appeal, as I've framed it, often operates in the short term, during the zenith of panic and uncertainty. In that moment, the population might be more focused on immediate, tangible actions and the promise of control, rather than on the mechanisms for long-term accountability or the potential for unseen errors. The desire for a strong hand to visibly take charge can overshadow concerns about the fallibility of that hand, especially if the alternative appears to be rudderless inaction. The risk of hidden mistakes is undeniably a severe flaw, and a key reason why such systems are undesirable in the long term. However, the appeal itself may not fully process this long-term risk when faced with what feels like an overwhelming, immediate existential threat. It's a gamble some might find appealing in their desperation for a swift resolution.
Ms. Rossi, While democratic processes are vital, Mr. Lai suggests that their perceived slowness or contentiousness during a severe crisis can diminish their appeal for a public craving immediate solutions. How do you reconcile the need for democratic deliberation with the urgency that a crisis often demands?
Dr. Hayes, the notion that democratic deliberation must inherently be cripplingly slow in a crisis is a misconception. Democratic systems are capable of acting with celerity when necessary, by streamlining procedures without sacrificing core principles of oversight and consultation. Emergency powers can be invoked, expert bodies can be rapidly convened, and communication channels can be established to ensure swift, informed decision-making. The key difference lies in the underlying legitimacy and public trust. When the public trusts that decisions are being made transparently and in their best interest, even if imperfect, their willingness to cooperate and support difficult measures increases exponentially. This collective buy-in is itself a crucial factor in effective and swift collective action. This contrasts sharply with the brittle nature of coerced compliance in authoritarian states, which can shatter under prolonged strain, or when the state's narrative is exposed as flawed. True urgency is best met with informed, trusted leadership, not just rapid commands.
We will now proceed to closing statements. Mr. Lai, your concluding remarks.
In closing, I return to the core of my argument. The appeal of authoritarian characteristics during a crisis often stems from a profound and understandable human desire for strong leadership and decisive action when faced with overwhelming threats. When societies are shaken to their foundations, the promise of order, of a clear path through the chaos, can exert a powerful psychological pull. This is not to say it is a rational long-term preference, but rather an immediate, visceral reaction to fear and uncertainty. Ms. Rossi has eloquently articulated the grave dangers and ethical failings inherent in authoritarian systems, particularly the suppression of rights and the lack of accountability. These are valid and crucial concerns that underscore why democracy, for all its complexities, remains the far superior system of governance. My intention was not to advocate for authoritarianism, but to suggest that its perceived capacity for swift, centralized control can, in the crucible of a crisis, appear temporarily appealing to a distressed populace. Understanding this psychological phenomenon is important. It highlights the tension between our immediate, perceived needs in moments of extreme peril, and the enduring democratic values that must ultimately guide us for sustainable, just societies. This appeal, however flawed, is a reality we must acknowledge.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Ms. Rossi, your closing statement.
Thank you. Throughout this discussion, we have explored the purported appeal of authoritarian regimes in times of crisis. I maintain that this appeal is a siren song, luring societies towards dangerous precedents and proving, more often than not, ineffective and harmful in the long term. The promise of quick fixes and iron-fisted control comes at an unacceptable cost. The erosion of fundamental freedoms, the silencing of dissent, and the entrenchment of unaccountable power. These are not remedies for a crisis. They are seeds for future, potentially deeper, crises. True societal resilience, the kind that can withstand and recover from profound shocks, is not built upon coercion or the illusion of infallible leadership. It is built upon the robust foundations of democratic governance, transparency, accountability, and meaningful public participation. These principles foster trust, encourage innovation, and allow for the collective intelligence of a society to be harnessed in addressing shared challenges. They allow us to learn from our mistakes and adapt, rather than blindly follow a path dictated from above. Therefore, I conclude with a call to uphold and defend democratic principles with even greater resolve, especially during crises. For it is precisely in these moments of trial that our commitment to these values is most tested, and their importance most crucial for our collective well-being and future.
Thank you, Ms. Rossi. And thank you, Mr. Lee, for your insightful and thought-provoking contributions to this important discussion. Tonight, we have heard compelling arguments on both sides, exploring the psychological appeal that authoritarian decisiveness might hold during acute crises, juxtaposed with the enduring strengths and ethical imperatives of democratic governance, which prioritizes transparency and accountability. The complexities of leadership and societal response during such times are immense. We encourage our audience to critically consider these perspectives, the values we prioritize when navigating turmoil, and the long-term implications of the choices made under pressure. Thank you for joining us. Good evening.